The door she left open. I had stopped expecting her. That is the honest truth. After those first few months of waiting, checking my phone, and lying awake listening for sounds that never came, I had slowly, painfully trained myself to stop expecting her. I'd created a new routine, a different version of normal, a life that had space for the grief of what happened, but no longer left the front door unlocked. And then, one Tuesday evening in October at 7:43 p.m., someone knocked on my door. I almost did not answer. I was halfway through making dinner. For a moment, I nearly let it go. But I did not. I opened the door, and she was standing there, older, quieter, with something behind her eyes that had not been there before. Beside her, holding her hand, was a little girl who looked at me with the same dark eyes my wife had looked at me with on the day I married her. I grabbed the doorframe because I needed something solid beneath my hand. She said, "I know I owe you everything. Can I come in?" The marriage before she left. "My name is Caleb. I am 38 years old, and 2 years ago my wife, Elena, walked out of our house and disappeared so completely that for the first 3 months, I genuinely had no idea whether she was alive. We had been married for 4 years when she left, and together for 6 years before that. We met in our mid-20s. She was a photographer, and I worked in architecture. We moved through the same creative circles in the city and had actually been introduced at least 3 different times before we finally had a real conversation. The fourth time we met, we talked for 4 hours at a gallery opening. I drove her home afterward, and she invited me inside for coffee. I did not leave until the following afternoon. Elena was different from anyone I had ever known. She was quiet in groups, but enormous in private. She had this incredible way of seeing things, people, places, and small moments that made you feel as if the world was far more textured than you had ever realized. Being loved by her felt like being truly seen. Our marriage was good. Not perfect, but good. She struggled with anxiety and sometimes had periods when she withdrew into herself and became difficult to reach. I learned her patterns. I gave her space when she needed space and stayed close when she needed someone beside her. I believed we had built something real, something that could last. I was not prepared for the way she would leave. There was no note, no phone call, no text. I came home from work on a Wednesday evening, and her coat was gone from the hook. Her keys were no longer sitting in the bowl beside the door. When I walked into our bedroom, her side of the wardrobe was open and half empty. She was simply gone. The 2 years without her. I filed a missing persons report within 48 hours. The police investigated carefully, but there was very little they could do. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play, and clear indications that she had packed intentionally. They gently explained that adults were legally allowed to leave. Without evidence that she was in immediate danger, there was only so much they could do. Her family was just as lost as I was. Her mother called me every week for the first 6 months. Her sister flew in from Portland and stayed for 2 weeks, helping me search. We contacted her friends, former co-workers, and anyone else who might have known something. A few people said Elena had seemed withdrawn during the weeks before she disappeared. One friend told me she had seemed frightened of something, but refused to explain what. That word stayed with me. Scared? It kept me from being completely angry because beneath the devastation and confusion was a constant, quiet fear that something had happened to her that I had never understood. Maybe she had been in trouble, and I simply had not seen it. The legal process brought its own kind of cruelty. After 12 months, a lawyer told me I could begin the process of having Elena legally declared absent. Eventually, if I wanted, I could move forward with dissolving our marriage. I did not choose to. Not yet. I was not ready to close a door when I had no idea what was waiting on the other side. Month by month, I rebuilt myself. I threw myself into work. I began running in the mornings. I started seeing a therapist, a good one, who helped me understand that grieving someone who is still alive is its own specific and brutal form of grief. I stopped trying to push everything away. I allowed myself to feel all of it. By the end of the first year, I was functioning. By the end of the second year, I was genuinely okay. Not the same as I had been before, but okay. I had even cautiously begun seeing someone. Her name was Diane. She knew everything about my situation. She was patient and kind, and she never asked me for anything I was not ready to give. And then Elena knocked on my door. The conversation. I made tea because I needed something to keep my hands busy. The little girl's name was Maya. She sat on my couch and looked around the living room with serious, curious eyes. She was 18 months old. Elena had brought a small bag filled with toys, and Maya quietly occupied herself while Elena and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Elena talked for a long time. I did not interrupt. The short version was this. She had been struggling far more than I ever knew. The anxiety I'd learned to live around had become much worse during the year before she left. After 2 years of treatment, she now understood that she had been experiencing a serious mental health crisis. She had become convinced, irrationally as she understood now, that she was destroying my life. She believed I deserved someone better. She believed the kindest thing she could do for me was disappear. She had gone to her aunt's house in another state. Her aunt, her father's sister, was someone I had never met. She took Elena in without asking questions and helped her get treatment. Therapy. Medication. Time. Slowly, over those 2 years, Elena had found her way back to herself. Then she discovered she was pregnant. She had been briefly involved with someone during her time away. It did not last. He knew about Maya, but had chosen not to be involved. Elena had raised Maya alone for the past year with help from her aunt. She told me she had not returned to reclaim anything. She had not come back to ask me to take her back. She had returned because she owed me the truth. She had spent 2 years getting well enough to finally face me and say, "I'm sorry, I was sick. I made choices that hurt you, and I could not explain them then, but I can explain them now." Then she pushed an envelope across the table. Inside were signed divorce papers. They were already prepared and already notarized. She had not come to win me back. She had come to give me my life back properly, with an explanation. She believed that was the least she owed me. I stared at the papers for a long time. Then I looked at Maya. She had fallen asleep on my couch, a small stuffed rabbit tucked beneath her arm. Then I looked back at Elena. What I said. I told her I was grateful she was alive. I told her the not knowing had been the hardest part. Not the leaving. The silence. The years spent wondering whether she was safe. She was crying before I finished speaking. I told her I was seeing someone. I told her I had built a life. I told her I could not simply take 2 years of pain, loss, and rebuilding and fold them back into the life we had before, because that life no longer existed. She nodded. She said she understood. She said she was not asking me to. I told her I needed time to process everything she had just told me. I could not sign anything or make any decisions that night. She said she understood. She carefully picked up Maya without waking her and gathered their things. At the door, Elena turned and looked at me the way she used to when we were first together, like she was trying to memorize something. Then she said, "You were never the problem, Caleb. You were the only thing that was never the problem." And then she left. Where I am now. I signed the papers 3 weeks later. It was the right thing to do. The only thing, really. Elena and I have exchanged a few messages since then. They have been careful and respectful. She is doing well. Maya is healthy and bright and apparently completely obsessed with dogs. I'm glad they are okay. Diane and I are still together. She listened to everything I told her about that evening. She held my hand and she never asked me to feel anything other than what I genuinely felt. That kind of grace is not nothing. That kind of grace is actually everything. What Elena showed up with that night was not a second chance. It was a closing, a real one, with words attached. And that was what I had been missing for 2 years. As strange as it sounds, I needed it. The explanation did not erase the pain, but it changed its shape. It turned it into something I could finally understand, something I could finally put down completely. Some doors close twice. The second time, if you're lucky, they close all the way. Leave a comment below. I read every single one.